The B-2 stealth bomber has been in talks recently because of the Iranian mission, but how do these things work and why were they able to fly in potentially undetected? Let's talk about it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the design. These things are designed in such a way that they avoid radar detection. And essentially, the way radar works is you're sending out, I think, radio waves, right? And once those radio waves hit an object, they reflect and you can detect, okay, so this has come back to me. There's something over there. And maybe I think if you send out enough waves, you can kind of tell the shape, how big the thing is, all these things. This thing is shaped in such a way that it avoids that. So essentially, instead of reflecting the radio waves back to the sender, they're reflecting them in different directions. So imagine you have a mirror and you shine a laser pointer at that mirror. But because the mirror is slanted, that laser doesn't come back to you. It goes somewhere else. Or let's say you have a flashlight. Now the light is shining in that direction instead of back in your face because it's a mirror, right? This is a similar concept. The next thing we need to know about is the radar absorbent material, or the RAM, right? And this is an F-117 Nighthawk, but the B-2 bomber would use something along these lines. And essentially the way this thing works is, again, like I said, it's about radar. So what would end up happening is when those radio waves make contact with the aircraft, that material takes some of those waves and it dissipates them as heat, right? Or I guess another form of energy. But essentially, the idea is they're not sending waves back to the sender. So they can't detect that, okay, there's something over there. And I don't think it necessarily makes it invisible, but it's okay, maybe you see that's a bird instead of a plane, or it's a very small object instead of a big object, right? It makes it harder to detect. The next thing I want to talk about is the way in which they store their weapons. So to my understanding, they store their weapons internally, right? So again, like I said, it's about avoiding radar detection. So when this hatch is closed, I assume it would be a lot harder to detect this thing. And I'm sure this would be detectable to radar, but it's already too late, right? They're already dropping the ammunition. So this is the point in time in which it really doesn't matter, right? But when they're flying, generally, the weapons are internal to the plane. You don't want weapons sitting like under your wings because, again, that makes it very easy to detect on radar. The last thing I want to talk about is how close they fly to the ground, right? The altitude. The altitude is a lot lower than typical air flight. And this is because, again, it makes it harder to detect by radar. But how? So imagine you're flying close to the ground and the radar's trying to pick things up, but it's also picking up that building over there, or that mountain over there, or whatever debris or whatever, right? That makes it difficult to detect what is actually going on over there. Also, the earth is curved. So, you can only see so far before you go and you're running into curvature, right? So that makes it more difficult to detect as well. If you are flying a lot higher, even with a curved earth, it would be easier to detect if you're flying a lot higher, is what I'm trying to say. So essentially that lower altitude makes it a lot harder for them to be detected. And I don't know if it's any one of these things that's like OD in terms of radar avoidance, but when you combine